Okay, let's continue our discussion about angles. We now know how to sketch an angle in trigonometry. And remember, our angles can be greater than 180 degrees. They can really go up to any number as far as degrees are concerned. And now what we want to discuss, and we can also have negative angles, but we want to take a focus now on what we call coterminal angles. And again, the word terminal just means where it ends. For example, if you fly into an airport, it's called a terminal. Basically, it's where your plane takes off and lands, okay? So when we say terminal, we're talking about the side of the angle where the angle ends. And remember, what is an angle? It rotates either clockwise or counterclockwise. So our angles rotate around a fixed endpoint, which is at the origin, and it rotates either counterclockwise, which is positive, or clockwise, which is negative. Okay? All right, so, okay, two angles are coterminal if the terminal sides of two angles coincide. What that means is they're at the same place. Okay, when you coincide, you lie on top of each other. So two angles are coterminal if their terminal sides of the two angles coincide, which means they lie on top of each other. So take, for example, let's say that we have a positive angle, which we're going to draw in red here, of 80 degrees. Okay? And it really doesn't matter what the angle is. So we have a positive angle of 80 degrees. Well, we could also have an angle that's negative of 280 degrees. Okay? So if I start with my positive x-axis and come all the way around in a negative fashion, so as you can see, there are two angles. There's a positive angle of 80 degrees and a negative angle of negative 280 degrees. These two angles are coterminal, meaning they have the same, I want to draw that negative angle, they have the same terminal side. And that's what we mean by coterminal angles. So an angle has many angles coterminal to it, which means there's infinitely many angles that can be coterminal. And you can say, well, how can there be infinitely many? Because I could end up, for example, with an angle that rotates around 180 degrees, and that could be a negative 640 degree angle. And then I could also have a negative 1,000 degree angle, which means I could just do more and more rotations around this. And as long as the terminal side, again, keep in mind the game of spinner, the game of twister. If you've ever played that game before, or if you've ever played a game that's had a spinner, you think about it, there's a spinner, and when you flip the spinner, it just rotates around and around and around. And it ends up somewhere, and wherever that terminal side is, that would be, of course, what you would end up having to do, what color. And so that's what we mean by coterminal angles. They have the same terminal side. Okay? So an angle has many angles coterminal to it. The measure of coterminal angles differ by a multiple of 360. 360 is the key here because it's one revolution. Okay? One revolution is 360 degrees. So take a look at what we're asked to do here. It says find the angle smallest and a positive, smallest positive possible measure with a coterminal angle. And I'm going to come over here and do some practice so that you guys can complete your worksheet all by yourself. So take a look at what I'm asking you to do here. Again, coterminal angles are two angles that have the same terminal side. Very, very simple. We want to find a positive and one negative coterminal. And usually when you're looking for your coterminal angles, you want to find angles that are smaller than 360 degrees. That's one of the reasons for doing this. But however, you can see in problem number 1 here, we have an angle of 80 degrees, and 80 degrees is, not greater than 360. So if I was going to sketch this again, it would be in quadrant number 1. There'd be my 80-degree angle right there. Now again, if I wanted to figure out a coterminal angle, well, first off, let's find a positive coterminal angle. Now you might be thinking, I already got a positive angle, that's 80 degrees. But I need a positive coterminal angle. So obviously what I need to do is take my 80 degrees and add 360 to it. Okay? So 80 plus 360 is 440. So a positive coterminal angle is 440 degrees. Again, I already had 80 degrees. I needed a positive, which means I need to continue to move in a counterclockwise fashion. So I'm going to add 1 revolution or 360 degrees. A negative coterminal angle means I'm going to go the opposite direction. So I'm going to now come from the positive x-axis all the way around to my terminal side, which is in quadrant 1. And so my negative angle would be 280 degrees. So it's going to be 80 minus 360. So some of you are already starting to figure it out. It's just basically adding or subtracting 360, and that's what it comes down to. Now, it is quite that simple. However, you also have to keep in mind that you want a negative angle and you want a positive angle. Okay, we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. Let's try another one, 150 degrees. We want a positive and a negative coterminal angle, okay? So my positive would simply be 150 plus 360 because I already have 150 degrees. And I will end up with 510 degrees would be my positive coterminal angle. My negative coterminal angle, we're just going to subtract 360. And I end up with negative 210 degrees. Now, it doesn't always work out perfectly like this. There's times when you have to do a little bit of manipulation, as in all mathematics. 230 degrees, again, it is greater than 0, so it is a positive angle, and it's also less than 360. So in order for me to find a positive coterminal angle, I'm going to take 230 and I'm going to add 360 to it. So 230 plus 360 is 590 degrees. So there's my positive coterminal angle. My negative, again, take 230 and subtract 360, and I end up with negative 130 degrees. So there's my positive and negative coterminal angles. But now we're getting to problems that are a little bit more interesting. 560 degrees is greater than 360, and since it's greater than 360, we can now find a positive coterminal angle that's between 0 and 360 degrees. So if your angle is greater than 360, you want to find an angle between 0 and 360. That would be your positive or negative coterminal angle. That's what you want to look for. So this time it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to take 560 degrees and I'm going to subtract 360 from it. And I'm going to end up with 200 degrees. Now, notice that 200 degrees is like the first 3 problems. It's an angle that's between 0 and 360. Now, because of that, I don't have to do anything special over here with my negative coterminal angle. I can just simply take 200 degrees and subtract 360. So 200 minus 360. And I'm going to get negative 160 degrees. I hope what you're seeing is that, again, we're just adding or subtracting 360 degrees. Our last 2 problems here center around negative angles. Now, again, we want a positive and we want a negative coterminal angle. All right, so let's see. If I take that negative 100 degrees and I add 360 to it, okay, I'm going to end up with positive 260 degrees. Now, since that's a positive angle when I added 360, then I'm okay. There's my positive coterminal angle. However, when I come over here to my negative 100 degrees, I'm now going to subtract 360, just like I was doing up here with my other problems, and I'm going to get negative 460 degrees. So that worked out really nice for us. There wasn't any manipulation that we needed to do. But when I get over here to 390 degrees, there is going to be a little bit of fun we have to do here. For example, if I look first for my positive coterminal angle, I'm going to get negative 390, and I'm going to add 360. But when I add 360, I get negative 30. Now be careful, that's not a positive coterminal angle. That is a negative angle still. Okay? Believe it or not, I can actually use it as my negative coterminal angle, because it is another angle that is coterminal, which means its terminal side would lie in the same place. However, these two angles are both negative, and I wanted a positive coterminal angle here. So what I'm going to do is take that negative 30 degrees, and I'm going to add 360 to it again. And I'm going to end up with 330 degrees as my positive coterminal angle. Now, in general, if you want to find any coterminal angles in general, okay, what does that mean? In general. You know, is there a formula? And the answer is yes. Take whatever your angle is, okay, and you simply add to it 360 degrees times n. Now what is n? N is the number of revolutions. Again, in trigonometry, what does a revolution equal? It equals 360 degrees. So if, for example, I had, let's just take one of these, negative 100 degrees, and I plug that in as my angle. If I add 360 to it, okay, I'm going to end up with what? 260 degrees. So that is a coterminal angle. Okay. What if my n becomes 2? Well, that means this is going to become then negative 100 plus 720, which is going to be 620. That is another coterminal angle. Now I can also substitute in negative values for n. That just changes the direction, becomes a clockwise rotation, and that would also change my answers here. I would start ending up with negative angles. So in general, this would be my formula that I would use to calculate all coterminal angles for a given angle. Again, by definition, what is a coterminal angle? A coterminal angles are two angles that have the same terminal side.